Well, so far it probably looks to you like Access is just a confusing jumble of parts. What you're going to find, though, is these parts really work together well, and they're going to make life a lot easier for you. So what I want to do in this lecture is give you a quick overview of the basics of just moving around. We're not going to go into how the parts are built or anything like that. We've got sections on each one of the parts. So if you've already worked with Access, be patient. We're going to go into a lot of advanced things later, but I always like to start out by making sure everybody has a good understanding of the basics of moving around. Now, we defined this section here on the left in the last lecture as a navigation pane. And yours might or might not be saying all access objects. I'm going to click on this, and that's what this does. It selects objects. I've called them parts. That's because I hadn't defined the word object. Do you see these four things here? Tables, queries, forms, and reports. I'm going to just click on the first one, tables. These are all objects inside of Access, and this is where you're going to spend most of your time, is with these four objects. And I've got a basic section and an advanced section on each one of these four objects. So that's 8 sections out of the course. You're going to be really good with them when we're done. Now, what I want you to do in this lecture, though, is just get used to opening and closing things and moving around. So what I'm going to do is double-click on the customer table. So I haven't told you how tables work or anything about them, but if you double-click on it, it opens. Okay? And you can click on the X on the right side like we did before to close it. Easy enough. Now, another way to open it is to right-click. If you don't use shortcut menus, you should start learning, because there's a lot of them in Access. I can right-click on many different things and get a little menu. So I've just right-clicked on Customer, and the first command is Open. Does the same thing as double-clicking. Now, notice that up here on the menu, if you click on the word Home, there's a Home ribbon. Every menu selection has its own ribbon. There's a lot of different ribbons here. On the left side is something called View, and it looks like some drawing tools up there. And if there, notice the little tiny triangle below there, if I click on that, it's showing me that I'm in Datasheet View, whatever that is, and I also have a Design View. So this set of drawing tools stands for Design. So if I click on the Design, go ahead and do that on yours. So now I'm in the Design of the customer table. And notice that the ribbon now has the other view. Remember what it called it? It called it a Datasheet View. And I can select that to go back. And actually I can just click on the icon, click once to go to Design, click once to go back and forth. Okay, I want to stress that because that's what you'll do a lot of the time. You'll be going back and forth on your four objects between designing them and viewing them in active mode. Okay, also notice that your customer has a little tab here, so that when you have multiple things, multiple objects open, each one will have a tab. One last thing to notice is, notice that when we open the customer, it actually adds something to the menu up on the top. It says Table Tools, and it's got fields. If I click on that, there's a whole other menu, and here's Table. Okay, now you might not have noticed this, but if I go back to the Home menu selection and go back to Design, that also changes the menu, and I have a whole bunch of design icons on a single ribbon for table design. Now if I close the table, it all goes away and I go back to just the basic menu. Now let's double click on Customer and just leave it open, and let's select the next object, Queries. Now I want you to double click on this one down here. Now I forgot to mention one thing. This is the database we're going to use throughout the whole course, and we're going to build a lot of things in here of all these different objects. What I like to do is give you a finished version of each one, and I put the word done at the end. So if I go to Queries, if I go to Tables, there's a couple of dones down here. If I go to Forms, just about everything is a done. If I go to Reports, a bunch of dones there. So that kind of gives you an idea of how many things we're going to be building in this course. So in each case, this is something you can look at if you have a problem. When you're building your version, you can look at what the finished version looks like. Now I want you to go back to queries. You just pull down the navigation pane, go to queries, double click on the orders over 1K. Now it looks like this query's got data in it. It doesn't have any data in it. All it's doing is it's got settings for pulling a copy and manipulating data out of a table. Always remember that data does not exist anywhere in Access except in a table. Queries can just pull out a temporary copy of the data, or they can manipulate the table directly, changing the table, deleting things, modifying values. But queries themselves do not have any data. Now notice also, nothing happened on the menu up here. But if I click on Design, it's the same thing as my table. I've got the design tools. I'll click on Design. Here's the format of what, really the rules for what the query is going to do. Notice that I've got a design menu and a query tools. If I click on the data sheet, it just goes right back. So it's just like tables. You can go back and forth. And you can see here's our customer. If I click on that tab, we're right back in there. So I don't have to close one object to deal with another one. Now I'll go to the pull down again, and let's skip over forms and go to reports. And just click on the bottom one, orders done. Now reports, once again, they don't have any data in them. It looks like they do, but all they are is formatters for data. Formatters for printed output most of the time, but it can be to send something to the screen. And usually they've got things on one row like this. They don't have to, though. They could be like a pre-printed form. You can have any number of reports. I didn't mention that with queries, but to me, all of these things are like documents. If you're using Word, or spreadsheets if you're using Excel, there's no limit to how many queries I can have. There's no limit to how many reports I can have. This is one of the basic advantages of Access. I used Excel a lot before I realized that Access would save me so much time, because with Excel, a lot of the time you're moving your data around till it looks like what you want to print, then you're printing it. Well, the thing that Access does is you've got the table with the data, and then you could have 100 reports, each one of them formatting the data in a different way. There's many times when I've literally taken a 2-hour job that somebody's doing with Excel, and we knock it down to double clicking on 5 reports in a row. And so a 2-hour job becomes a 30-second job. That's what Access can do for you. Now, one thing on this report, notice that we've got a little bit different icon over here. If I pull down the view, I've got 4 things here, not just 2. I'm in what's called a report view, but I've also got a print preview and a layout view. We'll deal with those when we go through the report sections. But I do also have a design. And when I go to design, look what it does. I've got 4 separate menu selections here. There's an entire ribbon for each one of the 4. And again, I can go back to the report view by just clicking on the icon. Now let's go to the last object, forms. I'll pull down the list and go to forms, and I'm going to double click on the very top one, customer. This is a form we'll use. We'll actually complete it during the course. And this also it's like a report. It formats data for output to the screen. You can print with a form. But one other thing that a form does is not only is it a formatter for output, but you can use it for input. It's kind of like a window into a table. So primarily you can use forms for data entry. You can have, and I've done a lot of systems where people never even see a table. They're dealing with tables all the time, but they don't realize it because all the data entry is through a form. And you can see one other advantage here. This has the orders for this customer. So this has a form called a subform inside this form. So you can have multiple forms tied together. And this is what you saw in the preview, where it gets rid of the one-to-many problem. So I know you don't know what these things are structurally, how they work. We can close each one. But what we will start doing with the next section, if I go back here to tables, we're going to go into the next section, which is basic tables. So we're going to create tables, modify tables, enter data in tables, and you'll learn all about it. Then we'll go right from there into the other objects. So you're going to be very familiar with all four of these objects when we're done. I'll see you in the next lecture.